In this video, I would like to show you how we could create a floor grid. And since at the moment we work mainly with a 45-45 cube, we will use that as our basis. To create a good repetitive grid, there are two ways how we can do this. First, we create ourselves a good, correct, proportional rectangle. So let's say maybe here. So what I will do now is actually defining how big, for example, my utmost front square will be. So this is kind of like the length of one square. So obviously now to quickly create the other stuff, I have to go to there, draw a line, and then to there, and draw a line over there, and draw this line. Okay, so, whoa, what happened? There. Okay, because we will create a grid, we actually need all these lines to the vanishing point, and they're important. So, because we now have actually the first square proportionally established, we can now go ahead and maybe here I will use red for the right side and create the missing squares of the grid by utilizing our foreshortening. So here I will draw lightly this line there, because now I can via foreshortening actually create the missing rectangles. So there we have that one. Okay, so that means from there to there, I would say, yeah, I can create the next element there. Okay, so then, again, because we established this midline, cutting through that midline, cuts somewhere else here, this part again, and then coming again from this vanishing point through where it cuts this line, and again we draw all these lines. So we can continue this play until we get closer and closer to the vanishing point. Let's do this one more time. There. Okay, good. So, and then the rest you can imagine that would be the same steps over and over again. Okay, so because we are in 45, we have nothing on the left side, but we have all the lines we need to create them. So you see, if I position my other vanishing point where the midline is being cut by these lines, you see it also there, I can from here draw a ray through where these rings are. So these two lines cut, the vertical and the lines from the left vanishing point, and I find all the other edges for my faces. So let me quickly undo all these steps, and there. So that is positioned. So here number 1, and there. Then number 2, and there. Number 3, and there. Okay, so let's check if this stuff is correct. So this point and this point should be exactly on the same height. So what happens if I draw a horizontal line? They touch. correct. This and this should be at the same height. They are correct. So the grid is good. So this was basically one way. So we create a very small front square, and then by utilizing perspective foreshortening, we just create our grid. There's also, I think, another measurement tool. I was just curious about one thing. Yeah, and there. Okay. See, on this line, this corner point through here has to run through there. So it's also correct. We can, for example, go to there and then line this up there. See, all those should be the same because we have the same also here. So that's another alternative way how to measure it. So let me show you a different approach. Instead of creating a small rectangle and then using perspective foreshortening to create the grid, we will actually create our area and then start subdividing it. So here now I have a rectangle, and because I drew in those diagonals, I found the geometrical midpoint. And because I have that midpoint there, I can now create these diagonals. No, sorry, not diagonals. The lines that run through where the diagonals intersect. And now you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. I could actually go ahead, draw a line here. You see now I can actually also subdivide this smaller rectangle here, and when I draw a line, so this rectangle is subdivided and now this back rectangle is subdivided. Same here, zip, there, okay. Here we have actually this one line and the midline cut, so that means if I position this point to there and to there, and there is the next line, and I have to go to there and then there and there. Okay, you see all the different rectangles. Let's try to take a look. Yeah, see, it's actually pretty close. So, which one is the better way? Well, I think they're equally the same. With the first approach, so here where we create the smaller rectangle and then subdivide it, we actually have kind of like a small space element. And let's say this is 1 meter and we need a room that is, let's say, 4 meters wide and then 3 meters deep. So it would basically be all those rectangles. So the easiest way how, for example, to create a grid that includes 2 different measurements for A and B. The downside is we have to do a lot of foreshortening, and the more you do it, the more maybe a mistake can happen. Here on the other side, I can create like a squarish overall format. Then I really know how big maybe an area is, and then I can start subdividing it. The problem is, till I drew actually this grid with all these squares, I have no idea maybe how big this square later will be. While, for example, here in this case, I know how big this one will be. So they all have their ups and downs, but you see at the end they're more or less the same. If you don't necessarily need a full grid, this method, drawing a big rectangle, might be better because you can then selectively subdivide what you need. So if you would ask me which one to select, I think they're equally the same. Maybe just explore and try out which one you prefer more, because even here, if you do some drawing mistakes, you will get some inaccuracy as well. But I feel like if this big rectangle and then subdividing that rectangle is a tick easier to draw it freehand more accurately than actually the approach with foreshortening. There's actually a second way how to measure the quality and accuracy of your grid, and the outcome is actually also a 1-point perspective floor grid with squares that actually foreshorten accurately to the depth. So what this means is here we have our midpoint, and you see that this point and this point, this point, there if I draw a line through it, it will go to the midpoint. So the same idea is, if I draw a line through all these points, will it go to the midpoint? So let's give this a test. So from there to there I draw a line. You see this is a diagonal inside this first square, and if I put down now a guide from the midpoint to the end of this blue line, this line I will draw should run through corner points. It does a little bit off. Let's go to the other side. Yeah, okay, let's go to the next area there, and you see it does. And let's go to there, and it also does. What's up there? See, still does. And what about, it's probably here, also does. Okay, so not too bad. So I was talking about 1-point perspective and foreshortened squares. So take a look at this. There we actually have our squares foreshortened. You can actually continue this there. There we have like a full grid. Let's maybe hide this. There we can see it actually, maybe better. Now I can maybe draw a line here through the center. That one was kind of missing. Maybe a line through here. Ta-da! Huh? Can actually continue this a little bit more, put in as many lines as we want. But essentially you see here, this is a rectangle, a rectangle, a rectangle, a rectangle. I think here we need another one because it's smaller and smaller. Yeah, there we have it. Basically, to accurately draw a 1-point perspective grid, the easiest way, if you want to have the foreshortening, start with a 45-45 grid, put this in, because then you have all the kind of like the depth points for how far actually the squares foreshorten to the midpoint. This is actually good to illustrate the problem one will experience when you do this with a grid that is actually created by the foreshortening. Because, as I very often in class mention, if you make one tiny mistake, and you draw small, it will later jump into your face. So let's draw this element. It's all okay. But there we see already, wrong. Okay, let's maybe take a look at this one. Even also wrong. Whoa, it's off a lot. And if I zoom in here, and there you can see there's a line, and I drew the line somewhere next to it, and here I'm a little bit off. So these small inaccuracies later with such delicate constructions really become an issue. This is actually another reason why maybe the idea to draw a big square and then we subdivide it is really a more manageable technique. So, and then here now we have our rectangles. And maybe here in the center. Well, I mean, it's still not too bad, but you can see this is off. This is too big. The stuff here seems to be fine, but then the one that obviously has some significant issues. There's also here a line. That was missing. Wah, wah. Okay, shouldn't have said that, but yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything about how to create a nice proportional grid in 45-45, or using the 45-45 grid then to create a nice ground grid for a 1-point perspective.